consultant, strategic consultant and insurance company. So very different, very interesting. We are very happy to have her today. She was actually envisioning herself giving this talk in the youth lounge, but God fulfilled her vision. And we are very excited to have her today. She's going to talk to us about financial and personal financials and how to take care of these interesting things. So please welcome her with me.
Thank you guys so much for having me. I am going to try to get my slides up. There is a participation component, so I hope you're comfortable getting your phones out and signing into menti.com. I'm going to give you a code just while the slides are being pulled up. And will I have Wi-Fi as well, Sam? Or should I hotspot myself?
That works.
Sorry.
It's youth.
That's fine. Yeah. Okay. So menti.com. And then I'm happy to do even just a very brief introduction while we get set up here. So I'm Sarah. I'm actually an Edge attendee, so I sit in your place most of the time, just until Ilaria reached out to me and asked me if I would do this talk. I've done this talk twice now, once at U of T to help new grads plan and manage their finances, and then in a spiritual capacity with our Sunday school group. And so I've inserted a little bit of the spiritual component in this talk. I wish I could say I had all the time to spend on talking about the spiritual component of finance, because the Bible actually has a lot to say about managing your money, but I want to focus on the practical, if that's okay. If you'd like to spend more time on the spiritual, if we have more time at the end, I'm happy to circle back to that. So let's see if this works, shall we? Oh, it's loading. Okay. A little bit of a longer introduction then is needed to fill up some of this dead air. So as Ilaria mentioned, I am an accountant by background, but I do strategy and consulting work now for an insurance company. I was in professional services before, so I'm a licensed accountant, but don't really do anything in accounting now. So that's my spiel. Perfect. Okay. So menti.com, if you've pulled it out on your phones, it's code 2396-4700. We'll do a quick poll where I hope you guys will be comfortable to interact, and then I'll flip into the content, which is another set of slides. So let me know when you're ready to go. I don't love being trapped behind this thing, so let's see if I can get out of it. And I can maybe make my way over to you guys a little bit. Anybody need a few more seconds, or are we all in? A few more seconds? We're in? You gotta help me out, guys. Yeah, we're good? Okay, I'm gonna click through in the interest of time. What comes to your mind when you think about finances? Feel free to type in anything, okay? And it's gonna populate a bit of a word cloud for us to ruminate. Again, this is a safe space, no judgments. Finance is something that doesn't come naturally for most people, myself included, so taxes, very good. Yeah, we're in a little bit of a tax season at the moment where if you don't own a business, your taxes are due April 30th. Fun fact. Budgeting, we're going to be talking about today. Income, absolutely. And I have a few slides on how to read your pay stub if that's something you're curious about. And if you've never really taken the time to understand what each line item is, we'll talk about it. Money in, money out. Yeah, very good. Investments, responsibility, bills. Stress. You guys can be honest. Feel free to put any kind of word that kind of comes to your mind when you think about finance. Okay. I think we're in a good spot, so I'm going to carry forward. We're going to do a little bit of an assessment. These are generally yes or no questions. Just answer honestly. I adhere to a detailed budget. Yes or no? No. That's okay. Hit no, and we'll talk about budgeting like I said, and I'll give you some techniques on how to set up your budget. So most folks are in the no category, no problem. I calculate my net worth annually and compare it to prior year. If you have no idea what that means, the answer is no. And I will go through how to calculate your net worth shortly. So that is also part of the talk. I think most people are generally, again, in the false category. No shame in that. We're going to learn today. I'm reasonably careful with my money. This is subjective. We're talking about personal finance. It's going to be personal to you. It's not a one-size-fits-all solution. but I'm going to try to give you guys some tips and tricks to help you out. So very good. Most people, I think, or they think at least, are, which is awesome. I can afford everything I need. So I want to differentiate this with want. Needs are very different than wants, and I'm going to explain that in a little bit more detail down the line as well. Very good. So I think most of us are feeling pretty content at this point. We're doing a lot better now. So hopefully the next half of these questions go super well. I pay myself first. Again, if we don't know what that means, likely the answer is no. What it means is when you get your paycheck, automatically you have money coming out, perhaps automatically, or you do it manually, that's fine, into a savings account, a donation, various, outlined accounts that you have, channeling your money away from a checking account. Okay, typically false. And we'll talk about why that's a really good strategy. I understand how to use credit responsibly. We're going to talk about credit and all its different forms at a very high level. I wish, this could be its own separate talk if I'm being honest. So if you have any questions, feel free to come up to me afterwards and we'll talk about it. But I think most people are generally okay. I pay off my credit card balance completely every month. Typically, right? Obviously, we have big expenses from time to time. I'm not talking about, big vacation or big purchase, but generally you can afford to pay off your credit card balance every month. Most people do really well. Amazing. I do not spend impulsively. I save up for major purchases, like I said, a big technology investment or a vehicle or a home or whatever the case might be. Oh, we were at 100% for a second there until somebody messed us up. No, I'm just kidding. We're gonna talk about it, and we're gonna talk about saving in terms of how to organize your budget so you can do this really comfortably. I have money saved in an emergency fund. So an emergency fund we'll talk about later is typically 3 to 6 months of your living expenses should anything go wrong. If you feel like you have that amount sitting in a high interest savings account at the moment or a GIC, we'll talk about what those are. The answer is yes. Very good. I think most of us are great here as well. This really turned around, guys. Like we were struggling and then we picked it back up, which is awesome. I have adequate life and disability insurance. The reason I ask, and you'll likely have this if you're employed full-time by a corporation, or perhaps you're a business owner that seeks insurance independently, but this is a really important tool. Insurance is a great way to actually generate a lot of wealth, and I'm not saying that just because I work in insurance. If there's something I want but don't need, I walk away and I sleep on it. This is very similar to the impulsive question. 100%. Oh, and then we just died down. No, we're great. I think this is another really tough thing is, and a great strategy perhaps is, if you walk by something that looks really great, am I able to step away? And if I still want it a couple days later, maybe think about how to save for it or how to finance it or whatever the case might be. I write down my financial goals and have a plan to achieve them. Like, when I did the first round of these talks, it was actually closer to the new year. So people were thinking about New Year's resolutions and what they wanted to do with themselves this year, but it's not too late. So if you don't have some goals in place, we'll figure that out. And I don't see that any of us, or most of us don't actually, so we'll work on that. I track my spending so I know where my money is going. Some apps will do this for you automatically. If you bank with a certain institution, it'll feed into a certain app if you'd like to track this. But I personally like to track manually just because I don't know about data going into third-party apps. But any form of tracking is okay for this question. And I think most people track, which is awesome.
The Mint app just got discontinued.
Yeah, that's actually a really, really great point. I don't feel comfortable with it. Some people do it. To each their own. Okay, I'm using an RESP, RSP, TFSA, FHSA. If you have no idea what those acronyms mean, don't worry about it. We'll go over it in today's talk. If you do, likely you've heard of these acronyms before and you're already actively involved in some of these vehicles. Great, I think most of us are, which is really great to hear. Does anyone not have a clue what these are? And be honest. Okay, we'll talk about it. Awesome, that's actually really great. I know where I'm going and how to get there. This has to do with a bit more like goals, planning for the future, what you want out of life, how you see life going for you. False 100%. That was actually really awesome. That's why you're here. That's why I'm here. No, I mean, it depends. It depends on your mood on any given day. But that's okay. We're talking about this in a financial context, okay, guys? Not in like the general life context. I do not gamble with my savings by taking excess risk. Again, this is very subjective and it's very personal. We'll talk about how to diversify and how to mitigate some of your risks. But again, some people are naturally more risk-taking, and so they'll feel that they identify with more risk-averse behavior when it's typically more risk-taking. That's okay. It also depends on your stage of life, and we'll talk about that. When you're young, you have more capacity to take on risk, just because we have the time, God forbid if anything were to happen, to recover and like recuperate losses, rather than when you're 60 or 75 and you're really depending on that income, right? So depends on your stage of life. I try to shop carefully using coupons and waiting for sales. What do you guys think? I mean, this depends, again, of course, but typically 100% of us, oh, no, we just dropped a little bit, but that's okay. I mean, hard to do 100% of the time, I completely agree, but I think this is a really great technique, right, to get you on track in terms of meeting certain goals. Okay, I keep well informed for everyday financial decisions. Like if you walked into a car dealership and they said the APR is this and that percent, do you have a clue what that means? Do you know how to factor that into a calculation to see if you're making a good decision? Let me know what you guys think. We'll talk about an APR if we have the time when we start talking about debt. My spouse or partner, if applicable, and I present a united front on financial issues. This might not be applicable to everyone. Again, when I did this session, it was a bit more of a diverse group, but feel free to answer. False, 100%. Bit worrying. We'll see if we can knock that down a bit by the end of the talk today, and perhaps maybe some strategies or conversation starters to get you talking about some of this stuff would be a great start. Money is not a taboo topic in my house. So again, growing up in a predominantly Middle Eastern or whatever household, did you guys talk about money? Did your parents share their finances with you, their goals, how they're getting there, any of this kind of information? We'll talk about how your relationship with money really stems from how you were raised, obviously, and a couple other contributing factors. But this is one of those things that will affect how you think about money. Okay. And so just a quick definition. It's so funny. I actually created these slides using AI. I just pulled my questions in and it created this slide deck for me. And so I actually really liked it and I started using it. But financial fitness is the ability to manage and make the most of your financial resources. It involves budgeting, saving, investing, and making informed financial decisions, all topics we're going to be covering today. There are certain key aspects of financial fitness, such as setting clear goals, creating a budget and sticking to it, building an emergency fund, and investing for the future. Like I said, all topics we're going to be talking about today. And so I'll keep flipping through. This might be a little small, so I apologize. I'll read it out. What financial activity do you prioritize the most? Do you save money for a specific purchase, investing in stocks or real estate, contributing to a retirement account, or donating to a charity or cause? Mind you, if you're diversified, you're likely doing a bunch of these, if not all of them. But what do you prioritize the most? Like, what are you really focused on? We talk about setting up automatic or scheduled payments out or transfers out into other accounts. This is what your money would ideally go into, right? These types of accounts. Awesome. So most people are really into the stock market or perhaps real estate, which is great. It means you love like tangible assets, which is awesome. There's also a few folks that love spending on things, and I caution that a little bit just because items might not necessarily be the best investment, but we'll talk about that. And then saving for retirement is really important. I know it might be a long ways away for some of us, but generally your employer will contribute or match a portion of your contribution, and so this is a free money or free lunch opportunity, as we say. In accounting, we'll talk about that as well. And donating to a charity or cause, we'll talk about that when we get to our spiritual, but I hope that's important to us as well. Next slide, if it loads. What is your biggest financial challenge right now? Be honest, be transparent, it's anonymous. We're just going to read what comes up in terms of your responses here. And let's see if I'm able to discuss some of these things. And again, if they're super personal, don't worry about it. Feel free to come chat with me later or look me up online and we'll have a conversation. but I'm curious if we can get a couple responses going. Otherwise, I'll just list typical challenges include obviously buying, really large assets. Yep, like a home, taxes, very good. You might not understand how they work, how to do them yourself, or what your accountant is doing with them. Not a problem. I don't do my own taxes. So I'm not here to teach you about tax today, but I think there's a lot you can learn on your own, especially if you do your own taxes. Knowing what to invest in. We'll talk about different options for investments in a bit. Saving for a house, income, it's a little general. Maybe feel free to, specify what that means. And then paying a mortgage, absolutely. With rising interest rates, that's become certainly harder, especially if you have a variable rate mortgage. So I can certainly empathize with that, and we'll talk about why a higher interest rate is really, really key to consider when you make a purchase that large. And taxes, best investments. Yeah, very good. We'll talk all about those things. And so, like I said, online, or AI kind of generated these slides for me. So based on what they felt was appropriate, it included understanding investment options, managing debt, creating a sustainable budget, and increasing income streams. I'll talk about all of these except for the last. The increasing income streams is a bit tough to generalize for everybody who has a very different definition of a work-life balance and what they're able to reasonably do in a given day. But again, feel free to chat with me after, and perhaps we can start talking about this. So this is the end of the presentation, the AI generated talk. And I'll flip into my slides here. Okay. And so I'll start with a couple fun facts. I do want this to be interactive, so please, if you have a question, just raise your hand or cut me off, and we'll answer them as they come up. But Canadians need help because we're borrowing way too much. I think Stats Canada reported that an average Canadian has 170% of debt to income, which is quite high. The reasonable average or ratio is considered to be 35% or less. So we're borrowing way too much. We're also spending too much. People are living way beyond their needs. Yeah, they're living beyond their means to finance their wants and not their needs. And we'll define these two concepts in a moment. And lastly, we're not saving enough. So almost 60% of those surveyed save less than 10% a month. In fact, individuals are saving way less than they did 2 years ago, which is a frightening economic picture. Oh, sorry about that. Here we are, which is a frightening economic picture because when costs rise, as we've seen them do because of the interest rate going up, it will stretch, if not has already stretched, your ability to make payments in the economy as a whole, as we've seen. And so we've done the poll, so I'll skip right through to the relationship with money. And like I said, this begins at home and in your childhood. How your parents treated money, behaved about or around money, spoke about money can in turn affect how you interact with money today. And so I want you to consider, what language did they use when they were referring to money? Was money really tight? Were they secretive about it? Did you get an allowance? If so, how did you get money from your parents? Was it, in front of doing something or accomplishing a certain goal? Did you know about it if money was tight or, if there were financial problems? And what about parent-guardian roles? So traditionally in certain households, perhaps one parent or guardian will be the breadwinner. Maybe the other was at home looking after the household. That will all influence how you perceive money and traditional norms in the home. And finance in general. And so I'll take a quick segue into what the Bible says about finance, and then we'll loop back into the practical very quickly, because I think as Christians, obviously in the home, we are influenced. And the Bible actually has a lot to say about finance, so this is a great segue while we're talking about the home and in childhood. So before I kind of continue through, any Bible stories come to mind of examples of finance in the Bible? What do you guys think? Any ideas?
The parable of the talents?
Yeah, the talents is a great one, absolutely. So the master allocates a certain amount of money to each servant, and then, to invest them, get several types of returns, and one just kind of buries it and does nothing with it, and the master's quite upset that he didn't invest his talents. Very good. Any other examples? That's actually not one in my slide, but it is in a future slide, so thank you for that. Any other examples of finance that come to mind? What about the woman, right? Giving her last 2 copper coins. That's really, the most well-known, the one that I actually expected to come up. What about the widow giving Elijah her last piece of food, or I think it was the oil and the water? There's also Joseph taking care and being generous with his brothers after he was thrown into slavery. Jesus feeds the 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And Elisha and the widow's oil, like I said. Lots of examples, and I'll tell you what I mean. There's a lot of different themes of finance in the Bible, and we'll start with contentment because it's just an important attitude for us to have as Christians, regardless of your financial situation. I do apologize, the text might be a bit small, but I'll read out the verse in here, which says, "I have learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in need." And that's in Philippians chapter 4, verse 11 and 12. And I think this, and actually as we were praying, I was reading again the prayer of thanksgiving out loud, and I'm like, this is exactly what it's talking about, right? And there are a lot of key statements that come up in that prayer that effectively should teach you this value. Next is stewardship, and we'll talk about this with reference to the difference between stewardship and ownership. Can anyone tell me what you think the difference might be between those two things? A steward versus an owner. And perhaps I can read the verse while you guys think about that. It's when Jesus teaches the importance of being faithful with what we have been authorized with. What do you guys think? Steward versus an owner.
Stewart, you're managing it.
You're managing it. You're holding on to it for a brief period of time, and ultimately it's not for you, it's not going with you, right? It needs to be transferred to someone else, absolutely. Faithful stewards, which include, what comes to mind is money and possessions, but I'd also like us to consider talent, time. These are all things we're stewards of. We have ownership of it for a very short period, and then we ultimately have to give these things away. Generosity, we see this on our donation cards. God loves a cheerful giver. So definitely something to keep in mind. Trust in God. The Bible repeatedly encourages believers to trust in his provision and to seek his kingdom first. And we'll reiterate this several times. The pursuit of wealth is not inherently good or bad, but just what we choose to prioritize and focus our time on is what we need to consider. Like I said, love of money. Okay, and all of these things, if like I said, we consider, being content, being generous, right? What is our priority, and so on and so forth, should lead to prosperity if our priorities, like I said, are in the right place. And this will come with blessings, will come with seeking the kingdom. It'll come with faithfulness and obedience, generosity and giving, and contentment, like I said. I don't want to dwell too much on these slides just in the interest of time. I know we have to cover a lot of really practical content, but I will spend time on God's economy, or the circle of grace. I found this actually while I was researching for the spiritual talk that I gave with the servants at our church. But it's a bit of a cycle, and it starts with God right up at the top, right? He gave us grace, and this is freely given. And I want you to consider that you're not going to get cut off from God. No matter what you do, no matter, how badly you behave, freely given and will never be cut off from this section of the circle. People in turn are gracious with others, right? Through action, right? We give donation, we give our time, we volunteer, and so on and so forth. That is kind of the bottom section of this cycle here. And lastly, in doing so, by being gracious with others, we are inherently giving God the praise and the thanksgiving that he so deserves. And so I thought this was really cool, as someone who studied economics, that this is kind of God's economy. Okay, and some practical teachings. I want us to go beyond the 10%. I think growing up, we're tasked with, 10% of your pay should go to your tithe, right? Put it in an account or save it somewhere, donate it at the end of the year, whatever your strategy is, all good as long as you're giving that 10%. I want us to really go beyond that. We see in Matthew chapter 6, verse 19 to 21, what we do with our money determines where our heart is going to go. And that's the treasure in heaven section. Really want to talk about that for a minute. We talked about stewardship and ownership. Greed, the money being the root of all evil, like I said, is not to say that the pursuit of wealth is a bad choice to make or not something that you should focus on, but really what you're prioritizing is important to consider, especially when you know that wealth can disappear really, really quickly. You want to be content. We talked about contentment and generosity. When I was giving this talk at Connect a few weeks ago, somebody either put up their hand or came up to me after and was like, Sarah, but God forgives all debts, so I don't have to worry about this. And I said, okay, God may forgive, MasterCard and Visa will not. So it's while we live on this earth, this is something and a life skill we need to consider and learn and implement in our daily lives so that we can be comfortable enough to live and to keep, like I said, our priority and our focus on God. Okay, I don't want to spend too much time, but the Bible actually does talk of risk management, diversification, investing, like we talked about. All of these are very important finance concepts and actually rooted in the Bible. And if you're interested on where some of these concepts come from, I'm happy to share them with you after the talk. But I do want to give you some strategies when you consider giving. If you're not sure where to start or how to give appropriately, I want you to consider being selective and intentional. What causes resonate with you? Like, what do you care about? What you care about is where your money goes. What part of the world do you want to impact? What, do you volunteer with? What do what really lights you up, or what do you do in your free time that you can consider giving back? And like I said, there's a monetary component, absolutely, but I also want us to consider from a time perspective, a possession perspective, a talent perspective. And if you're curious, you can use the Charity Intelligence website to look up charities that you might be interested in contributing to and see how they're doing financially in terms of reporting, in terms of visibility, and a bunch of other metrics that the website uses to report on various charities. And how willing is the charity able to engage with you and kind of give back to you? Like I said, in God's economy, things are very cyclical. God will give you, you will give others, and in turn, you're giving back to God. And so that cycle is kind of what makes it go round. How will you give is an important thing to consider. So it takes money to operate a charity. The church that we're standing in is not free to operate. Regular giving, meaning regular contributions through automatic payments, creates predictability for both you and the charity. So something to consider if that's something you're comfortable with. And there's many ways to give. So you can give cash, as we know. You can actually also donate securities, insurance, certain forms of lines of credit, and so on. And your accountant can help you plan for the most tax-effective form of giving if that's something that you're interested in looking into. How much will you give? We're going to talk about this when we get to our budgeting slides in a minute, but giving a % of your income automatically should change also as your income hopefully increases and adjusts as well. So this is something that you should be factoring into your budget. And like I said, understanding the tax benefit. So you can benefit financially from giving. As we know, we're approaching tax time. You do get a credit for giving if your charity provides your charitable receipt, of course. And some gifts are more efficient than others, like I said. So again, if you're curious, feel free to chat with your accountant, and I'm sure they'll point you in the right direction. Okay. Back into the swing of things with Budgeting 101. And I want you to kind of pretend like you're running your own small business and knowing your numbers like a CEO would of their business. We want to adopt a business-oriented mindset, so we are calculating your net monthly cash revenue, your fixed expenses, your variable expenses, and your net profit. If you've never heard these words before, let me know, and I can explain what that means. But your net monthly cash revenue is all your money coming in from various income sources. Your fixed expenses are things that don't change from month to month. Say you pay a fixed mortgage or rent or whatever the case may be. Variable expenses, things that are variable and change from month to month. And your net profit is what you get when you subtract those two kinds of expenses from your income. And if you have debt, understand exactly what it is you owe and what the interest rates are on those debts. And we'll run through an exercise, time willing, at the very end, where I'll show you what the true cost of something is when you factor an interest rate. And I want you to think about all of these things in the context of, are you turning a profit? Meaning, are you making money? Are you withholding money after you do this calculation at the end of each month? Or are you running losses? And we want to calculate this in the context of our net worth and cash flow. So two really, really quick formulas here. Your net worth is calculated by taking everything you own less everything you owe, right? And your cash flow is all cash coming in less cash flows out. Really, really, really simple. I say I love accounting because the math is super easy. We're not doing complex work here, folks. It just takes time to figure out and sit down and run these numbers. I will say it's really difficult to plan for something if you don't know where you're starting from. And so this is an important starting point for us here. And ideally, your net worth is positive and growing with assets increasing and debts shrinking. We're going to talk about debt repayment in a minute as well. And doing these things can provide a sense of control and hopefully peace of mind. This isn't meant to stress you out further or add to your already long list of to-dos. This is meant to actually give you ease of mind. And so that's actually one less thing to worry about. Okay. We're going to run through this very quickly. Like I said, when I first created these slides, I was speaking to folks that might not have even made their first paycheck yet. I assume that most of us are past this. But really, really quickly, I want to start with the top line here, or number one, which is your year-to-date gross, bi-weekly, whatever frequency your pay stub is coming in. This is the top line. It doesn't include any deductions or disbursements, not even tax. So your real pay obviously is going to be less than that when you factor those things. No need to talk about an hourly rate. If you're a salaried worker, your hourly rate's just your gross divided by standard 37.5 or 40-hour work week, whatever it is. Next is your deduction. So obviously this is going to reduce your pay. These things include your income tax, your EI payments. EI stands for employment insurance. It's if God forbid you're laid off or are unable to work for whatever reason, the government will disperse these funds to you because you've been paying into these funds as you are working. It's a type of insurance. If you meet certain criterias, of course. And your CPP or QPP, if you live in Quebec, is your pension, Canada pension. So when you retire, you're able to get these funds back in the form of a pension from the government. All right, so EI contributions, talked about that. Pension contributions and other kinds of deductions include health benefits, insurance costs, their own pension plan, your own company pension plan, professional fees, and the list can go on and on of the types of deductions you'll see on your pay stub. If you've never really looked at a pay stub or your pay stub before, please do. Payroll can get things very wrong. And I've caught mistakes, or my friends have caught mistakes on their pay stubs when things have gone on cycle because some of these adjustments can be manual. So please get into a habit every 2 weeks or whatever frequency. I urge you to look at your pay stub, make sure everything makes sense, and then save it in a folder somewhere. Okay, and your net pay, like I said, is calculated after you take the top line less all those different deductions is what you get at the very end. Of course, right? Okay, so really great quote. Albert Einstein once said that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it, and he who doesn't pay it. Who's familiar with compound interest and how it works? Fantastic. We're gonna see a great example of this in a minute, but an example that I have here is actually imagine if I give you a penny and promise to double the amount every day until the end of the month. So on the first day you have a cent, 2 days, 2 cents, day 3, 4 cents, and so on. You would actually have close to $11 million if we had 100% compounding by the end of day 31, which is why we don't have 100% compounding in our real world here, but that's the power of it. And you might be thinking, I know where you're going with this, and every finance professional will throw this under the bus, but it's your daily coffee, right? Example, and how much you can actually be saving if you put this money away. And this isn't to make anyone feel bad about their splurges. I love it as much as the next person, but really great thing to throw under the bus when you're trying to demonstrate a point. So let's say your daily coffee costs you $4. At the end of 5 working days, $20 a week. Really, really simple math, like I said, which is why I love accounting. Over a month, this coffee habit costs you $87, and at the end of the year, it costs you $1,040, and over 5 years, it adds up to to $5,200. What if instead of buying a coffee, you put $4 in a jar and invested it at the end of the week, assuming a return of 8%, which is typically what standard ETF will yield at the end of the year, or at the end of a certain time period, depending on the type of year the ETF is going through, your savings will have grown at the end of 40 years to almost $305,000 and some change. So $20 a week, guys, after 40 years is $305,000, assuming a return of 8%. I know I said a lot of words. If that confused you, feel free to chat to me afterwards and I'll walk you through it. Because I need to move on to budgeting really quickly. And this is a simple budget. It's called the 50-30-20 budget. It says that 50% of your income should go towards your needs, 30% towards your wants, and 20% is to savings. And the savings category also includes money you'll need to realize future goals. So a couple things I want to note here is all these numbers add up to 100, not 170, not 120. We're not spending more than we make, right? And I say that with regards to your regular consumer spending. Purchases that require financing, like your mortgages and cars, will be discussed later. And your basic needs are actually very few. We'll see it on the next slide. Shelter, food, basic transportation. I mean, really, just getting from A to B. Your wants are endless. You know, new iPhone, new car, whatever, bigger house, vacations. When you figure out what you truly need and try and minimize your wants, you maximize the ability you're able to save, right? And ultimately, what you're able to do in the future with that money. So let's break this down. Like I said, your needs are few. They include your utility bills, your housing, healthcare, groceries. I put down telephone and transportation, but telephone does not mean the latest iPhone 5 or 15, I think we're on now. And your transportation isn't the Tesla, whatever. It is very basic needs, right? Your minimum debt repayments also are included under the need category, and tax amounts if you're self-employed. Otherwise, like we just saw in the pay stubs, they're automatically being removed for you. And charitable giving, I've actually placed both in the need and want category because it's a little bit of both. You want to give, I hope, cheerfully, like we said, but we know we need to give. Like I said, your wants are endless. These also include any subscriptions you have to streaming services. The gym is also, unfortunately, included as a want. There are cheaper ways to work out if you really wanted to. Supplies, restaurants, vacations, and so on. And like I said, 20% should go to your savings. These include paying down debt beyond the minimum payment, your retirement accounts, and your emergency fund, which is 3 to 6 months of your living expenses. Okay, we've all heard of SMART goals, so I won't spend too much time here, but I'll show it to you in the perspective of a goal to save some money for a vacation. So let's make it specific. My friends and I are going to take a 2-week trip to Australia. Measurable, I need to save $3,000 for the flight and my share of the accommodations and meals. Attainable, we're going to travel off-peak season, stay in reasonably priced hotels, and save elsewhere where we can. And realistic. When you do that math, if you realize you're going to need this money by X date, you're going to realize you need to save approximately X amount, in this case $250 a month, for the next year if that's when you plan on going. Really easy math. 3,000 divided by 12, like I said. We can all keep up with this kind of math. So knowing your limits and your financial capabilities at this step with reference to your budget should help you realize whether this trip is attainable or not for you. If you do the math and your number is way over what it should be per your budget, likely you're not going on that trip or you're postponing or you're doing whatever you have to do to make those numbers work. And then time framed, of course, like I said, you attach a certain timeline to when you should have these savings together. Okay, I'm going to go really quickly through the financial planning vehicles. So those were all the acronyms you saw when we did that poll in the beginning. Your first home savings account, I'll spend some time here because it's a new vehicle implemented last year, so April of 2023. It's to help you save for your first home. So you must not have owned a qualifying Canadian home previously to qualify for this kind of account. But I do want to note that you can make contributions for up to $8,000 for 5 years, total of $40,000, right? 8 times 5, easy math, to help you get a down payment for your first house. So really great vehicle to use if that is a savings or type of goal that you have. Your contributions are deductible, meaning you will receive a tax credit for making these types of payments into the account, and your withdrawals are taxable. So say that $1,000 that you put in turns into $10,000, the government will not tax you on that growth in the vehicle, making it, like I said, the ideal choice if your goal is to buy your first home. Next is your TFSA, or your tax-free savings account. Your contributions aren't deductible. The government is not giving you any credit toward this type of investment, or holding any investments in this account, I should say. But the benefit is your withdrawals aren't taxable. So similarly to the FHSA, is if there's growth in these accounts, you get them tax-free. I like the flexibility of a TFSA because you can hold any investment in there for any purpose. You don't need to be saving for a home, and you can withdraw the amounts at any time, which makes it really convenient. You just have to be aware of your contribution limits and certain withdrawal rules to make sure there aren't any penalties. But again, if you have any questions on this, we can talk about that later. And lastly is your RRSP, or your registered retirement savings. Likely, if you have a company pension, you're already contributing to a similar vehicle or an RPP, a registered pension plan. These contributions are deductible. So when you get your T4 from your employer, it also shows how much you contributed to your RPP, and those contributions are deductible when it comes to filing your taxes. But your withdrawals are taxable. The whole purpose of this account is to help you save for retirement, with some caveats if you are buying a home or you're planning on returning to school, but I won't get into the logistics of that. What this is meant to do is, like I said, help you save for retirement, such that when you get to the age of 71, this account converts into what is called a RIF, and you're able to make withdrawals when you're in retirement, likely in a lower tax bracket, saving you on tax. When you're in a higher tax bracket, making more money in your youth, versus when you're retired, likely having no income sources, and therefore you pay less tax. At the time when I gave this talk, I put the deadline for contributing to your RSP for the 2023 year, but that has since passed. Any contributions that you make at this point on will count for 2024. And this is probably one of my favorite slides. It's your investment options. As you can see, the risk level increases as you move down on this slide. And every investment comes with different pros and cons. So we say, and I'll start at the top, that cash is king, because when you're buying something, the easiest way to get it is however liquid you are. If you offer someone cash versus, hey, I'll get it to you in 2 weeks, likely you'll get a different answer from a seller. So it's the most liquid form of ownership. However, it comes with various disadvantages because there's an opportunity cost that we say to holding cash, which is you lose out on the potential benefit of earning interest or growth or appreciation if you held some of the other assets. And you'll notice I left out real estate because I'm talking strictly about investments that you can hold in those financial vehicles that I talked about on the last slide. Next is your savings account. So again, a more basic type of investment, but it allows you to deposit your money and earn a modest amount of return. So I think my high interest savings account at most is maybe you'll receive like 3%, but in terms of holding your emergency cash, things that you want to keep for, God forbid, should anything go wrong, you can dip into that relatively easily and you'll lose out on practically very little. And so that's why I recommend that, or the GIC, which stands for the Guaranteed Investment Certificate, for holding your 3 to 6 months emergency savings. Basically, these certificates offer a guaranteed rate of return over a certain time period. So you can have 3, 6, 9, 12, and so on year investment certificates, depending on what your financial institution is offering. Will have different rates depending on the time period. And this is another good option for short-term meaning a year or less than a year holding. Next is your savings bonds. Basically, these work like an IOU that investors will make loans to a company, government, and will usually earn a fixed rate of return, very similar to a GIC, but you're making this agreement with a company, like I said, institution, government, and they're offering you the fixed rate of return. Mutual funds and ETFs are very similar. The difference being is that mutual funds pool resources of individual investors and use it to buy securities, such as stocks, bonds, or other mutual funds. Generally, these are managed actively by portfolio managers, and so the fees are slightly higher than holding an ETF, which stands for an exchange-traded fund. It's an investment fund that, again, pools the money of various investors into a pool of stock or bond, index, and trades on a stock exchange. So, like I said, very, very similar, but typically because ETFs are less actively managed, you'll find the fees a lot more reasonable, I guess, lower certainly, and you are able to trade an ETF very similar to how you would a stock, like on a stock market. A mutual fund needs to be purchased through a licensed dealer, a financial institution. And lastly is your securities, your individual stocks listed on a stock exchange, such as your Apple, Microsoft, and so forth. Okay, the number one priority in terms of your finances is to preserve your capital. You don't want your investment going from 1,000 to 0. And if that is your goal, and especially if you're extremely risk averse, you'll tend to stay in the higher portion of this chart. Like I said, though, we're typically younger. We can afford to take more risk. And as you get closer to retirement, your propensity towards risk will decrease naturally. So why not dabble if you're comfortable? Again, this depends on your risk profile in some of the items in the later half of the slide. Especially as you learn about these and get more comfortable, you'll see that there are wise ways to invest your money in the latter half that might not be as risky as you think. And the last thing I'll say is please designate, and again, this is the insurance person coming out, designate your beneficiaries where relevant and possible. So that means, God forbid, should anything happen to you, your money will pass to these beneficiaries, hopefully in a tax-free manner, so they don't have to worry about, how do they, get access to these funds. Becomes more important, again, as you have beneficiaries later in life. Okay, and the concept of diversification, like I said, is actually introduced in the Bible, but it plays a role in counterbalancing the negative performance of some stocks or investments with positive performance in others by using the law of averages. So let's say during COVID, and I have a great example here, you only invested in airline stocks. During COVID, nothing was flying. So likely you saw a huge negative decrease in your funds, resulting in massive losses. Had you diversified your portfolio into perhaps an e-commerce business like Amazon, you would have been diversified such that the increases in Amazon may have offset your decreases in the airline stocks. And so this is just an illustrative example, but if you already have investments, maybe take a look today and figure out what percentage of your portfolio is held in all these different investments and see if that's something you're okay with, or would you choose to rebalance that? Okay. Different kinds of debt, all kinds of debt run our world. Yeah, I'll pause there.
This classification in the previous slide, why precious metals is never mentioned?
This was just an example I used.
Yeah, but generally,
yeah.
no one is thought like
Gold?
for example.
Yeah, no, that's a great call. Gold works very separate from the stock market, right? It doesn't typically follow patterns and behaviors because it's a commodity. So it would be its own separate line item, right? You'd have to introduce this as a separate piece of the pie chart, not in one of these areas, right?
And that's usually traded on like what you think its value will be in the future.
Yeah, so there's a price for gold on any given day. It's traded as well. If you'd like to invest in gold, I do have ETFs. Like I said, you can buy and sell as you would a stock of companies that invest in gold bars and store them in vaults. So you don't actually have to go physically buy gold like your tant and mama might in Egypt. You can just own gold ETFs and be relatively diversified that way as well. If you're interested, I can give you the ticker symbols of those at the end of the talk. Different kinds of debt. So student loans, line of credits, credit cards, auto loans, mortgages. The only thing I'll note here in this slide, and I can go into a lot more detail again if this is something you're concerned about, is that APR that I mentioned. It stands for the annual percentage rate. It's your interest costs plus other costs a manufacturer at an OEM might introduce to increase the price of the cost of the asset, right? And so something to keep in mind when you're negotiating, right, signing an auto loan is, what is my APR? What costs are included in that? And obviously negotiate, please, with your OEM before signing on the dotted line. The cost of credit. So like I said, I'll show you an example of what it costs to make the minimum payment on a 20% interest rate credit card. If you had bought the item outright, it would have cost $1,000. But if you had made the minimum payments, which is the 20%, you would actually pay for the same $1,000 item almost $2,400 over 10 years to pay that same balance, right? So if you're making minimum payments on your consumer credit card, please, let's have a chat. We'll try and get you out of it, because that is not your ideal state for sure. Okay. Credit tracking. We're almost to the end, guys, so I'm actually doing really great for time. Credit tracking. When you get your first credit card, you enter into the lovely world of credit tracking, where you give these two companies the ability to track your movements financially. these would be your TransUnion and Equifax. They provide a profile of you based on your record of repayment and debts. Okay, so they're private companies, they're not public institutions. People don't have access to these things unless you give them your report. And they need your permission to gather, like I said, and share your private information. But they do have the permission to do so. And like I said, so a couple main things here. Let's talk about your credit reports. A couple main sections. It's your personal identification, any credit inquiries, like if anyone's done a credit check on you, credit history, public record information, and consumer statement. Your credit rating, we'll talk about that in comparison to a score in the next slide. But these have all kinds of information. They're free actually. So if you'd like to make an account when you go home today and check out what these two institutions have on you, you can, and feel free to do so. I actually, when you make an account, they'll send you a weekly update of your credit score, which I find quite interesting because it doesn't move very much week to week, but over time, obviously, there will be changes as you pay down your debt regularly. It increases. You get a little bit of a ding, it will decrease and then come back up, of course, if you get back on track. So lots of really interesting things in these reports. If you're curious, make your own account and download your report. And very quickly, what a credit score is versus a rating. A rating is specific to each individual item you have open, such as, for example, the loan you have on your phone, the loan you have on your car, and so forth. A rating of 9 means that your bills are never paid, and a rating of 1 means that you're doing really well. Your credit score estimates your credit worthiness. So when someone is looking to see if they will extend you cash, the higher your credit score, the more likely you are to receive more favorable payment terms. Poor is considered a score of less than 600, and excellent is anything over 750. Again, this doesn't mean you're completely debt-free. It just means you don't make late payments, you're staying on top of your debts. And like I said, it actually breaks down what it determines, including the amount you owe, your payment history, your length of credit history, types of credit, and any new credit that you've opened up with the different weights there at the bottom of the slide. Okay, a couple more slides. I'm almost done. One thing I like to do, when we did the poll earlier, we talked about walking away from something, you see at the mall, something you really want. This is something that I use when I think about, should I make this purchase or not? And it's the concept of cost per use. How much does this item cost divided by how much times you anticipate using it? Or the number of times you anticipate using it, sorry. So if we take a look at an example, I use the iPhone 15 Plus. Cost is $1,700, retail value. If you use it for 2 years, 10 times a day, the number is actually closer to 100, fun fact. Your cost per use is around 23 cents. If you think that's a reasonable investment for you to make, feel free. I'm just kidding. Don't go buy the phone, right? This isn't a marketing scheme, but just an illustrative example again of how you can use the formula to figure out if you want to buy that new pair of shoes or whatever it is you want. Some resources. Feel free to take a picture of the slide, or I'm happy to circulate the slides. Google is your best friend, likely, and I mean like 99% of the time, your question has already been answered online. Online templates are found online as well, including the Government of Canada budget planner, savings plans, calculators to calculate your interest, your mortgage, your auto loan, amortization, etc. The CRA website has a great finance toolkit, and the CPA website has great programs on financial literacy if you're interested in getting more information. There's also great media or print options if you're someone that likes to scroll or read something physical. I recommend train your algorithm, right? Like, we all have social media, we all use it on a daily basis, I would think, or maybe that's just me, but train it to enjoy finance content. So look up, different types of people that, hopefully won't influence you in a negative way, but will teach you, right, to enjoy this content and hopefully help you stay on track. There are also podcasts, newsletters. I personally like TLDR by Well Simple. There are books. I have recommendations listed here. TV shows, if you still want to Netflix but enjoy finance content. Again, maybe that's just me. And of course, YouTubers that will guide you. Just be wary of Canadian versus US content. Generally, the same principles apply, but their classification of certain financial vehicles or investments that we've talked about today are named differently and have different features. So just be wary, but otherwise you're okay. And lastly, you can see a financial advisor. There are different kinds. There are, the people that you'll see in the bank. Those are pretty traditional advisors versus your robo advisors, people that you can, robo advisors, used by Wealthsimple to guide you into a certain type of decision if you need assistance virtually. Or traditional, again, example is a brokerage account where you make an appointment, you sit down and you walk through things with somebody. Again, it depends on what your preferences are, what you're looking to get, but just please do your due diligence, shop around, get comfortable with the individual or your method for getting advice, because their compensation will sometimes depend on making certain sales to you. So just be wary of how their fees work before you make any kind of commitment. And so there isn't a silver bullet to learning all this. I tried to do my best in just under an hour to get through a lot of this content, but please sit with it yourself and ruminate and do some reflection. And if you have any other questions, I'm happy to take them now. That's it. Thank you guys so much. Do you have time for questions? Or? Yeah. Okay. Happy to take questions. Yeah.
So you had a slide that said the needs and the wants and not, and one of the needs was the taxes for self-employed.
Yes.
Can you elaborate more on that and how to keep track throughout the year so it's not a shock by the end of the year?
Yeah, your accountant should help, but there are also calculators online where you'll be able to put in your income. It'll project it. If it's variable, that might be a little bit hard to average, but generally you'll put in your yearly income and it'll estimate the amount of taxes you need to withhold yourself, so that come tax time, your accountant's not like, you owe me $5,000 and you're like, I don't know where to get that, right? Mind you, if your tax bill is over a certain amount, I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, your accountant will help you make, it's like a payment plan. So you're not required to pay all of it at once. You can pay it in installments over a certain duration. We can talk a little bit more about that if it's a personal situation. Any other questions? Did you guys enjoy this? Was it good? Yeah? Are we more confused or less? This is why I have like this. It's like more confused. I remember when I gave this talk at Connect, people's faces were like, they fell. By the time they started out really like happy and it was great. The poll went really well. And then as we progressed in the talk, people got more and more stressed. And the note taking became more and more furious like as time went on. This is why I have a little poll at the end. Like, are we more stressed? Are we coping? Are we okay? Yeah.
I have a lot of questions, but you can alternate as two.
How much time do we have for questions? Maybe I'll start there. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Something about the when you were talking about the first home owner
FHSA
credit or something.
Yep.
You said something about that it can grow, but how does it grow? Do you invest the money that's in there?
Right.
I don't know much about it.
That's okay. So you'll take these options, right? Whatever you decide to hold in the account.
Okay.
Cash won't grow. The cash you put in will stay at the amount, right? But anything below cash, you'll place in your account. So the limits are $8,000 per year.
Of what you invest, not
correct. So you can put the entire $8,000 in an ETF, or you can split it up, or you can manage it however you see is best fit for maximum returns. And you'll go to your bank or whatever institution, and you'll say, I want to open up an FHSA, and they'll help you out.
So it can be done with any banking institution.
Any banking institution. I don't know about Wealthsimple or Questrade. If you're thinking of opening,
like, general banks like RBCs.
yep, general banks will help you open it.
You can open with the two.
Yeah.
You're allowed a maximum of $8,000
per year,
up to 4.
5 years, so $40,000 in total.
But you can make that in splits.
Yep. So it doesn't have to be $8,000 all at once. In 1 year, you have a maximum of $8,000 to deposit times 5 for a total.
You can't make $8,000 in 1 year.
No problem. Your max is
take your time.
Take your time, but your max is 8 per year.
Can you carry forward?
You can't. I don't think you can carry forward. I'd have to look that up.
What was the advantage of it?
You can use this. So withdrawals are not taxable to pay your deposit for your first home.
As opposed to what?
Your down payment. As opposed to...
Like if I had money in a savings account.
Yeah, so
It won't grow.
that's a great question. Your contributions are deductible, so you actually get a tax credit for making contributions into this account.
Is it worthwhile?
Yes,
You'll pay
of course.
$8,000 less taxes.
Yes, you pay less taxes on $8,000 at maximum, right? Otherwise, which makes it preferable to this. But this and this can be used in conjunction, and part of this, but I didn't really get into it. Let's just focus on these two. There's a caveat to this one, which is why I didn't mention it. You can combine these two limits, right? So the contribution limit for your TFSA this year is $7,000. And it started when you were 18 years old. So you calculate your contribution limit since you were 18. That's your total for your TFSA. You can add that to your $8,000 per year for 5 years to calculate the maximum room you have to invest money to effectively withdraw tax-free to pay your down payment on your first home.
And any amount that you don't end up using in your FHSA can actually go into your RRSP.
Yes, correct. So these accounts have a lot of really unique features and a lot of if, ands, buts, don't, you know what I mean? I'm very much generalizing. Yeah. So I'll tell you guys a funny story. When I gave this talk at Connect, just before I ended it, someone raised their hands and was like, I was so motivated, I opened up my first FHSA while we were talking. He just did it on his phone.
You can do that.
You can do that. I'm not advocating for it, but he was so motivated. He's like, I did this now. I'm like, wait, just do your own research, go home, right? Ruminate on this. We have a long weekend coming up. So take the time to do some research, and then whatever you decide you're comfortable with, go and seek that out in the future. Not tonight.
These accounts are amazing.
Yes, these accounts are great. Again, this is preferable if you don't already own a home. If you do, that's it. You're pretty much done. Out for the count. There is an asterisk here, but I'm not going to talk about it.
Why?
Because you do your own research and you'll read up on the exclusions on this one.
Okay.
And then your TFSA is your next thing that you should invest in if you don't have this available. And of course, your RSP. Yeah.
So I think it is, you can roll over as long as you have one open, by the way.
Correct.
I guess the answer, but my question was, what if you don't use it for a home?
Yeah, great question. It rolls over into.
Rolls over.
Yeah.
I can't take it out otherwise. Right?
Nope. Because but does that make sense? Because your contributions were deductible as they are here. Right.
But then it'll be taxable when you take it out
As retirement income, generally when you're in a lower tax bracket, yes. Yeah.
Might be a stupid question, but is all debt bad debt?
No.
Yeah.
No.
Can you expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah. How much time do we have? No. Okay. When we say debt is not the best thing to have, I'm talking about consumer debt. I'm talking about your 20% interest rate credit card or whatever you have that's bogging you down and is honestly at a very high interest rate. Anything above 10% is an interest rate on a piece of debt that you might want to consider paying down as quickly as possible. That being said, when we talk about assets like real estate, those have growth in terms of appreciation, right? And you can see that in our Canadian housing market. A house is worth way more today than it did 20 or 30 years ago, as well as the benefit of, and the way Canadians have been using their primary residence historically has been to save for retirement. So you'll notice a bunch of, say seniors. I know I live in an area with, large properties owned by seniors that came to Canada in the 50s. They will downsize from their property, have no retirement savings other than they're downsizing from their home, and that is what they're using to finance their retirement, right? From that perspective, can you say debt is bad? No, because they bought the house, they paid it off, they live in it mortgaged and rent-free, they pay their regular utility expense and bills and their property tax, but otherwise they own it. And it's worth $1 million, $2 million where they bought it at $50,000 back in the day. So that, from that perspective, debt can be a really useful vehicle to financial freedom, right? And a way forward to retirement if you can't afford to save money separately for this purpose. That being said, and a lot of people are speculating, like, how long can this go on for? Like, how much more expensive can things realistically get before people pop? Because houses are very unaffordable for most at the moment. So that's an interesting topic. If you're interested on that, I think do a little bit more research, and I think you'll find it a really great learning opportunity. Yeah.
Since we're talking about how things are getting expensive, can like a slight glimpse on what's going to happen with the carbon tax?
I have no idea. Not an economist, so I don't have the answer to that. But like I said, Google has 99% of the answers if you're interested. I have no idea what's going to happen with the carbon tax. I've heard really crazy things about there being a rain tax or something coming. I can't keep up with it.
Stormwater runoff.
Yeah, I can't keep up with it. Feel free to Google that one and maybe you can let me know. You'll teach me something new. Yeah.
Would you recommend if someone is to invest in stocks, to invest all their stocks through a TFSA? Yes or no, and why or why not?
Okay. I think if I were to distill what I said in one statement is please build your emergency funds first.
Yeah.
Your 3 to 6 months of living expenses. God forbid, should anything happen to you, that is your safety net. Then I would put my money towards paying down high interest rate debt. Anything over 10% is something you need to focus on and prioritize. Then consider these investment vehicles in this order, right? So if you are saving for a home, this is something viable to you. If it's not, jump right into the second one, max that out. Then max this out, and then open up your non-registered accounts, meaning there are no tax benefits for you there. You're taking after-tax proceeds and putting them into the account, so there's no tax savings. But you can appreciate that growth, and when you sell, there are certain tax advantages to certain types of investments. For example, dividends are taxed differently than capital gains. It's taxes in a whole other world, but if you have questions, we can talk about that as well. But that is the order. Yes, capital gains are half taxable where your dividends are taxed a little bit differently. So, any other questions? That's a little bit technical, too technical for most people though.
So, number 3, about the retirement saving plan.
Yes.
So, let's say if you're planning to leave completely, kind of not coming back, you just take your money out all, and you're not like.
That's a great question. I actually have no idea.
Because when I called CRA, they were very flinky about the answer. They just said like, they said if you're leaving completely Canada, so when you come back, there will be a big portion you have to pay when you're landing, and there will be a big portion when you're like leaving. I was like,
okay, so try Google, because I find that people's first-hand experience, nothing, eh? Yeah, that's a very personal situation.
So you have to go to apply as a non-resident first.
Right. Tax
So non-resident. I'm not going to reside in the country.
Any other? Yeah.
Just make sure you grab everybody.
No.
Can you, when it relates to cars, you said something about APRs. Can you?
Yeah. I really did gloss over that. All that is, it's just a different way of calculating the cost on an auto loan. You'll see APR, right, financing, and you're like, dude, I just know interest rate. Like, what is that? So all that is to say, sorry, I'll go back to the slide. It's your interest rate plus other costs they've included in that
So this
rate they're giving you. Yeah, you'll see APRs when you're trying to buy something. Absolutely. Yeah, and this changes from person extending you the loan to person extending you the loan. It depends on what they're including in the other costs to calculate this number. So just something to be mindful of. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you go back to the resources page?
Yeah.
And I'm also just wondering, what are your favorite podcasts to listen to?
Great question. I actually listen to the Edge podcast.
Great answer.
I really do. I can't, and I'll tell you why. Forgive me. But I can't listen to anything super like technical when I'm working. I like to listen to more like spiritual things that, you know what I mean? Podcasts that I like. Okay, so Wealth Simple actually has a great podcast. They also have the TLDR newsletter. That's a newsletter that comes on a weekly basis, but they also have a podcast if you're interested on keeping up with the latest trends or what people are really curious about. They have really great finance experts manning that podcast. It depends on what you hope to get out of it, right? Do you just want to stay up to date on trends? Do you want investing and saving strategy, right? It'll depend on what you're looking for, but feel free to like just shop around, right? Listen to like 5 minutes of that one, 10 of that one, and see what you kind of like, right? Any other questions? Comments? Well, I hope you guys. Oh,
I can ask more.
Yeah.
We can do it one-on-one.
No. Let's do it. I think everyone's benefiting, so I appreciate it. Yeah.
You said something about RESP. You only collect RESP after the age of 71. There was something about 71.
An RESP is the education. So RR. That's okay.
Sorry, I think I could.
No,
You said something
RESP.
about 71 years old, and I was curious about that.
Yeah. Okay. That's a great point. But I'll just backtrack for a minute. An RESP is something you should think about opening for your kids that are likely to pursue higher education. If they don't end up pursuing higher education, you can roll that into other kinds of funds if you're interested. But I'll move on to this. That was just for one individual, just for you. I went over to one of our Connect servants' houses the other day, and I helped him set up his RESPs for his kids. So it was a great learning experience. Anyway, hands-on learning is the best kind of learning. Your RRSP is something you should not withdraw from before the age of 71. I'll tell you why. Anything withdrawn from that account, depending on how much you make in your current state, is taxed almost at the highest tax rate.
But what if you don't make it to 71?
Your money will go to your beneficiaries. Your beneficiaries will benefit. That's life. They won't if they're designated as your beneficiaries. Like proceeds from insurance or these kinds of accounts. I know life insurance for sure is passed on tax-free. I might have to search, but I would assume because you've already paid tax on it, it might be distributed tax-free. I can look that up. But life insurance for sure, and that's what I meant by life insurance being a great vehicle to saving for also future generations, because your contributions are deductible as part of your proceed or your deductions in terms of your health benefits, but you're paying into this fund that effectively gets passed on when you do pass away to your beneficiaries, and that's tax-free. They don't pay any tax on it.
But why does it not come at 65, which is their usual retirement?
They delayed it, yeah.
They did push it.
Why? People are not living longer.
The government is such a fascinating, interesting.
The government needed to collect more money. So like, we'll just delay paying those people
Like
a
the
few
average
years, and then we've collected more money.
Right.
They could delay it
Great
again.
question to Google, though. I don't know the
That's
answer.
not fair.
By the time we retire, it might be even later. Who
Yeah.
knows? It's not.
People are working longer. I don't know if that factored
People are
into.
not living longer. I know that to be a fact.
I get you, but the whole concept is like you are not to remove it until you stop working. Okay.
Whenever that might be.
Whenever that might be, mind you, it converts into a RIF at 71. That is, it's an income fund.
Okay.
A retirement income fund, I think, is what it stands for. It's when you're able to make withdrawals at a.
Is it affected at all by your pension?
Two different things.
Like,
Two different things. Because imagine like you're paying into the pension plan, Canada Pension Plan, right, from your deductions. You're paying into this as another deduction. Your employer RPP will be a separate deduction on your pay stub. Two different funds that you'll ultimately be able to receive income from when you retire.
Yeah, so you might be getting like 2 checks from different
Correct.
avenues when you retire.
Depending on what you have. Yeah.
So nobody talks about crypto investing. Like it's something
Yeah.
brand new.
Too volatile.
Yeah, too volatile, and something that is not advisable for a general like audience. Like it's not something you could speak to without having an hour-long talk on that topic alone, just to make sure you do it
But like there's
justice.
ETFs that came out from.
Yes, there are ETFs. So if you're not comfortable with investing in crypto directly, also because tax implications are a little bit weird with crypto, you can get an ETF if you'd still like a piece of the pie without as much of the risk. An ETF is a great option.
And it would be slightly more liquid than actually buying
Correct.
crypto.
Correct. And way more tax, maybe, effective, depending on how tax works for crypto. I have no idea. Possibly. Any other questions? Okay. Glory be to God forever and ever. Amen. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you so much for such a lovely talk.